Morning, everybody, and welcome to this talk about Jubula. Today we're going to talk about extending Jubula. So I hope you're all users of Jubula and are testing with it. Whom of you is actually using Jubula? One, okay. Are you a developer? Yeah, okay, that's perfect. My name is Markus Tiede. I'm one of the lead engineers and core developers of the Jubula team. And I would like to show you a bunch of different things you can do and how to extend Jubula. And maybe there's, at the end of the talk, some time to discuss some individual needs you have, which may not be discussed in this talk. So the agenda for today is pretty small. First of all, I think you all have a rough knowledge about what's Jubula, maybe the users a little bit more. I want to go into a little bit of detail what different kinds of parts Jubula falls apart, and then where are the extension points, where are the extendability points, and how it's done in general. So Jubula is an open source project at Eclipse since 2011, and we are doing UI automation for several UI toolkits. So what's probably most important for you guys is RCP, SWT, maybe Jeff, GMF editors, and so on. But we also do, for example, Swing, HTML. In the most recent past, we also added, for example, iOS as a toolkit for test automation. So that's us. And maybe if you haven't heard of Jubula that much, you may be thinking that Jubula is some sort of a monolithic block which tests your AUT, your application under test, right? But when we're talking about extending Jubula and taking a look at the bigger picture, you actually have to know that Jubula consists of multiple different parts. So the one you're working with every day is something we call the ITE, the Integrated Testing Environment. That's probably you've seen in some demos. That's this. It's our specification client, where you can specify your keywords, your test suites, where you can do object mapping, start AUTs, and do your daily work with testing. So there are a bunch of extendability points there. We're going to talk about that in a second. And Jubula, or the ITE itself, is not capable of remote controlling the application under test. And it's not actually managing the application under test. Oh, sorry. And the ITE is also storing all of its data in a central database. We're also going to take a look at maybe how to add more database support to Jubula. But the AUT itself is actually controlled, and the lifecycle of the AUT is actually controlled by something we call the AUT Agent. Okay. So the AUT Agent is either you're working with the embedded version of the AUT Agent, or it's a separate process, a separate application. And this starts, for example, the AUT, communicates with the AUT, and remote controls it. Okay. So for now, we have like 2 applications in Jubula. And when it comes to, for example, continuous integration, so you want to maybe start your tests from Hudson, from within Hudson or Jenkins or anything, we also got some other tools to do that. We call that the test executor. The test executor is that component which is the headless RCP application for the ITE, which is able to drive the AUT agent and thereby the AUT. Okay. And furthermore, if you have special requirements to run or start your AUT, if it's not possible to start it via the ITE or the test executor or the AUT agent more specifically, we also have got something we call AUT Run. That's a tool you can launch your application from arbitrary locations. So it's not directly started by the AUT agent itself, but from this wrapper. So 4th application, and last but not least, we also have a tool to automatically im and export and delete projects from the database. We call that DB tool. And this is also another application that comes with Jubula. So just a small disclaimer here. We always say testing with Jubula does not require any programming skills. That's right. But if it comes to extending Jubula, you do definitely need programming skills. So just keep that in mind. You have to be at least an RCP developer to do that. And it's pretty likely that all of you know this. When it comes to extending applications, it's pretty good if they're RCP or OSDI based. So all of our applications are, and there are basically like, two common ways to extend an RCP applications. It's either to use an existing extension or to write one on your own, okay? And I would also like to show you today how it's possible to, for example, build Jubula on your own, completely from scratch, because it's very easy. So this is the third option of extending Jubula, to simply write the code itself if we don't have an extension point for that, and maybe contribute that. Using extensions, that's, I think, well known. You simply go to Jubula itself. The ITE is using P2, and you can install features into it. It's there where you would expect it, beneath help, install new software, and you can point to a P2 directory and install some features that are already there. For example, if you work with Eclipse for testers, does anyone work with Eclipse for testers? Or EPP package? Due to licensing issues, we can, for example, put our database drivers under EPL because we, for example, support Oracle as a database. And if you want to have like Oracle database in the backend, you have to install a database package from this update site, for example, and then you are good to go with Oracle or MySQL, for example. So this is the usage of existing extensions. Keep in mind that only the ITE is a UI RCP application, an RCP application that actually has an UI. The AUT Agent, AUT Run, TestExec, and the BDB tool are headless RCP applications. So you have to eventually install it in a different way. The second option is, unfortunately, currently there aren't that many extensions of Jubula, so you probably end up, first of all, writing it yourself and maybe contribute it or host it on an update site on your own. And writing extensions is basically pretty easy for an RCP developer. You basically take your IDE. We would recommend, or I would recommend, to set the installation directory as a target platform. That's the easiest way to get the correct dependency set up. Then you simply, for example, write a bundle or fragment or anything like that, or a feature. You use some extension points we provide. I'll talk about that in a second. And last but not least, you deploy it either by the first way or other ways into Jubula itself or into the applications you're extending. Has any one of you have you ever tried to build Jubula on your own? No? No? Okay. Because this is also a third option. Maybe we don't have an extension point and you want to fix some bugs or contribute something. This is also an option, and it's very, very easy. So we've got a Git repository hosted at Eclipse. You simply have to clone that, and to check whether it's buildable or not, simply invoke in that Git clone afterwards ANT. We have a mixture of ANT, Maven, and Tycho build, but this ANT call and the build script we have, which is directly located in the Git clone root, will handle everything. It will, for example, build Jubula and in the recent version also, for example, the dashboard, our single source web application. So you don't have to have any knowledge about actually how to build it from the command line. It's pretty easy. The setup of the IDE and the dependency setup is described in a wiki page we have. It's directly linked here. So if you look over the slides afterwards, you can simply go to that page and see how it's done. Okay. We are currently the ITE we are using is currently based on Juno SR2. So this is our current target platform. Though we also, for example, participate in the release train, so we are also Kepler compatible and also Luna compatible as a runtime environment for us. And yeah, as soon as you've built your local Jubula, you can simply update the Jubula you have from this repository. It's org Eclipse Jubula site target repository, there where Tycho puts it. Okay, so that's also a way to get your own implementations into Jubula. So this should be it. With a general introduction is how to extend and which components are extendable of Jubula. Now I would like to talk about where are some extension points and what can you do with them. And first of all, we're going to take a look at the ITE, how to extend the ITE. Now you have to know when working with the ITE, the ITE is responsible for a bunch of things, and you can do a lot of things in the ITE. Because, for example, it's responsible for loading and storing all of the test data and the projects. It's responsible for doing the test analysis. It's responsible for test data computation. It's responsible for many, many things. So first of all, we're going to take a look at these. This is only an excerpt of the possibilities where you can extend. But we're going to take a look at test data functions, how to write your own reports, how to write own test style rules. Maybe you've heard about the Unbound modules, our library. You can simply add and very easily add your own Unbound modules and distribute it within your local installation, for example. I will show you how to set up keyword layouts, ALM repositories, and maybe also support other database instances. Has anyone ever used test data functions? Have you ever used test data functions?
Yeah, I think I implemented one long ago, just for testing.
And it's pretty easy. We added this feature like a year ago, I think. Till then, we only had like static test data computation at test runtime. And a year ago, we added this new symbol for our test data language, which is the question mark. And Jubula ships with a bunch of predefined functions. For example, basic mathematical functions like add and multiply and some date functions. And this is a pretty cool feature. It's you can do very many things with that, but we only ship like a bunch of functions. So you might want to extend that if you have custom test data computation, maybe retrieve some data from a URL or so on. And what you've got to do about you're doing this by using an extension point. It's called org Eclipse Jubula client core functions. And for an RCP developer, this is pretty straightforward. You add a new function, you give it a name. You have to implement an interface and provide a class that holds the technical realization of that function implementation. And you simply have to implement one interface, a function evaluator. And the function evaluator gets an array of string arguments. This is the already pre-evaluated values that goes within to that function. So, for example, the actual value of v1 and v2. And you simply have to return the resulting string that your function computed, because functions are all string-based. Any questions to that? Then there's, in the most recent Jubula version, 7.2 and 7.1, we added all the features that came from the commercial tool and also put it into Jubula to make it freely available. And one of the main features that comes with that version is the capability of doing reports. So we have again a bunch of predefined reports where you can do like a long-term analysis of your test results. We got, for example, in this case, a report that puts into relation the code coverage results, for example, with the number of expected and executed test steps during your test execution. Yeah, but this is only an example. We also got, for example, for daily stand-up meetings. Yeah, so if you do like a daily test analysis, we got this test result comment report. If you've got a bunch of test treats, maybe some of them fail, you want to have an overview and the capability to comment on them. So we also have, for example, a report for that. But our reports won't necessarily fit your specific needs. So we simply use BIRT for that, business intelligence reporting technology, and you simply can grab our library, our BIRT library. We recommend the BIRT Designer version 2.6.2 to use to do that, and then you can simply find that library in this directory. Simply go, there's a directory-shaped bundle, so you can simply go in there and take the library and reuse it, and reuse all of the data sources, data sets, and predefined reports, master pages, and so on that are in there. And to deploy your report, you can simply place the report file into that directory again, and then it will be available in the AUT and in the ITE. Sorry. Have you seen that before? The reports. It's simply not connected to a database. It's simply a drop-down menu down here where you can find the reports, and it will simply appear, and you can also invoke it. But what's even nicer than deploying it into the ITE, maybe for example, also for like giving external people a view of your current test status by giving them a report daily, for example, a daily report. You can also deploy these reports on a central BIRT viewer instance, for example, in a Tomcat. Yeah, that's a normal feature of BIRT. You can simply also take our reports and place them there, and then you can invoke them from a central URL instead of invoking the ITE. Maybe some of your team members don't have the ITE. Okay, and this is possible because BIRT uses its own JDBC connection to the database. So we've got a mechanism. I'll talk about that in a second, but you don't have to worry about that. Simply put it there. Then there's also a formerly known enterprise feature. It's called test style. It's pretty similar to check style, but as we don't store any of our data in the workspace, or only pretty few data in the workspace, and most of the data gets stored into the database, we have our own implementation for checking that your tests are specified in the right way. And you're also able to add your own rules. If our predefined rules, this is only a subset, don't fit your needs. And again, this is done by an extension point. You go to client test style definition, define, for example, your own category, provide a class that implements the check, that simply checks for any arbitrary object whether it has an error or not. This class gets automatically called when the completeness check gets triggered. So each time we don't do any like compiling in the background because we have no Java code being produced, but we are constantly checking whether your project, your test cases and your test suites are executable. And if you provide a class with this implementation, you automatically get called whenever that check is performed, and you can add some errors to some objects you get here. There's also a bunch of base implementations. You can simply take a look at how we do it and implement it in an analogous way. Then there are Unbound modules. It's our basic keyword library, and we already ship with a bunch of them. For example, for all the toolkits, we provide wrapper keywords for all the caps, component action parameter or test steps we provide. And these are, yeah, as I said, basically only wrapper keywords. And maybe over time you will notice that you've got reoccurring test steps, reoccurring, we call it like generic or unbound modules that don't depend on any specific AUT implementation. Yeah, for example, selecting something from a menu and then waiting for the dialog to appear, or clicking graphical context, a graphics component, and then waiting for a dialog to close. Yeah, so this kind of logic appears pretty frequently, and so you can, as of now, for sure, also define your own reusable projects. But not only that, you can also like deploy them normally like Unbound modules. For example, if you've got one department that has a nice subset of reusable test cases, you can simply take these and put them into a fragment. That fragment has a fragment host, and that fragment host is supposed to be Jubula client UI RCP. And if you do that and name it in the correct way, it has to begin with Unbound modules. and put it in the resource library folder and into that fragment, it gets automatically imported into a database whenever a new database instance is being set up. So this is also pretty nice to deploy a central and reusable version of your own Unbound modules, which are reusable across different AUTs. Then there are keyboard layouts, and this is something that is RCP specific. As I mentioned, we support different kinds of toolkit implementations, or UI toolkits, Swing, HTML, iOS, and so on. And keyboard layouts, unfortunately, is something that is only necessary for RCP because of the native RCP controls and the display post method we use to inject the characters into the event queue. We have to inject them in the correct way with the correct modifiers being pressed. And what you basically do with keyboard layouts, you basically say which character, which non-base character is pressed in which way. Yeah? So we have a predefined mapping for German and American keyboards, but maybe this is not enough for most users. This is, but maybe it's not. Then you can again simply write a fragment for this bundle, Jubula client core, provide a proper file which is named in this way, located under resources keyboard mapping, and then you simply say, for example, this is taken from the German one. I simply say the double quotation is getting entered by pressing Shift plus the base key 2. Yeah, so this is basically the mapping. We don't provide that for all of the keyboards, but it's pretty easy to do that on your own. Then there's a new feature in Jubula 7.2, which came out just 2 weeks ago. And we have a majorly increased ALM integration. We had Mylyn support beforehand, but now we are able to, for example, connect test cases with tasks in your ALM repository, for example, in TrackJira or Bugzilla, and automatically report comments on test failures or test success. And this is, you can easily extend the list of supported ALM repositories by simply installing more connectors. Jubula and the ITE comes with these 3 connectors pre-installed, but if you need some more, it's basically based on Mylyn, and whatever Mylyn supports, we're also able to connect to and report to. So this is also a pretty easy and nice way to connect to more ALM repositories. Then there are database types, and this is the only extension where it's currently necessary to explicitly build Jubula on your own, because we don't necessarily want users to add arbitrary database, but it gets asked in the forum once in a while, and so I thought I might mention that. We have a list of predefined database, supported database, or unsupported databases. We have the H2 database, which is bundled within Jubula for demoing purposes and to do the evaluation or something. We don't recommend that for productive usage. For productive usage, we encourage people to use an Oracle instance, but sometimes it's not possible to gain access to such an instance. So we also added an unsupported supported for Postgres and MySQL, which is labeled with unsupported because we don't actually test these systems thoroughly, because, yeah. And maybe even these are not enough. We had some customers asking for extended database support. And as we're based on JPA and Eclipse link, this is, in theory, it should be pretty easy. And we are potentially compatible with much more databases, but we don't explicitly want to maintain these, all of these. What you've basically got to do is you've got to implement an abstract host-based connection info, which simply provides the some of the JDBC specifica of this database connection. Yeah, so you can simply it basically contains the database driver and name, the driver class. Sorry, and then you have to via a separate fragment, for example, provide the JDBC driver, and then simply build Jubula, and you can, in like 4 hours, add or evaluate the support of other databases. Okay. So, any questions so far? Because, yeah.
Out of interest, did you extend the Jira connector? That's Jira has a connector to Mylyn with Eclipse and Mylyn.
Yeah,
Did you extend that
we simply use it. We simply use it.
Okay.
We simply bundle it and use it. So for now, I would like to leave the ITE and speak a little bit about the AUT agent and the AUT, what you can do there. Okay. Today I won't go into detail about how to extend, for example, AUT run, test exec into the DB tool, but there are also like some ways you've got to extend these if, for example, the ITE gets extended. I want to talk about that today. So I want to talk about 4 things. First of all, something you can do in your AUT, how to improve the UI widget recognition. Then are some of you using Jeff, like Jeff editors, GMF? Yeah? Okay. So we have also a way to enhance the addressing of figures within it. I will talk about that. Then there's, in the tutorial on Tuesday, the question came up whether it's possible to add custom monitoring agents, such as Jacoco. We'll take a look at that. And then, last but not least, we'll also take a look at supporting custom widgets, components, and/or toolkits. But this is a pretty big topic. We'll get to that in a second. This is something we strongly recommend to do a minor modification in your AUT to majorly improve the UI widget recognition. Because what we have is, I don't know whether you heard about that or not, we have a heuristical way of finding UI widgets. Yeah? So we are, there's a fuzziness implemented. And by default, this fuzziness takes, for example, the hierarchy path into account, as well as the name of the component and the context, like the neighborhood and siblings of the component. And the Ähnlichkeit, similarity, thanks, of all of these informations has to be higher than 85%, and then we say, okay, we found that component. And you see in this default recognition profile, the name weighting is pretty high. And that's why we recommend to simply name your components. And that's something you have to do explicitly in your AUT. And it's a toolkit dependent how you do that. But as soon as you've done it, it's majorly improving the recognition profile. For example, in Swing, you set name on that widget. In SWT RCP, you say set data with a custom with that key and the ID. You can also do it in HTML and iOS. Set this unique identifier for that UI widget. Okay. So this is, for example, an extension within your AUT to improve the recognition profile of Jubula. Then, improving Jeff testing. I don't know whether any of you have already done this, but if you're, for example, doing the object mapping with a Jeff editor, such as this, this editor itself doesn't fall apart in all of its figures or edit parts, but you map the editor as a whole. Okay, and when you want to address like certain figures or edit parts within that that figure canvas, we have to use a tree path. We recommend a regex-based tree path to address these figures. And by default, this tree path, you can find this or get this tree path by using the inspector tool. It's not really, it has no real semantic, because we don't know, for example, on this chessboard, what's a pawn and what's not. It's simply an edit part, a bunch of edit parts and a bunch of figures. So it's basically a generated name for these, or a generated path, which is using the type and the index of that component within a parent. So this is pretty similar to the UI widget recognition, but within Jeff editors. And there was a talk last year on the EclipseCon Europe, one of my colleagues held, and I put in the link there. You need a little bit more information how to do that, but in general, you have to provide an adaptation from your edit part you've implemented to an edit part identifier. It's basically the same as for the widget recognition. And this is done by the normal extension point of runtime adapters of Eclipse. So for more information, go to that page and maybe look it up. Then custom monitoring agents. We have a built-in support for Jacoco, so that you get, for example, auto code coverage reports after running your tests, and it gets transferred and stored in the database, and you can render it as an HTML and so on. And if you, for example, like to add some other monitoring tools, for example, to monitor the performance or the whatever you want to monitor during test execution, you can do that, but you have to do that on your own. This is, for example, a Jacoco report. For whom of you who use Jacoco, this is pretty straightforward. It's the same report, we simply use Jacoco. And you have to do two things. Now it gets a little bit tricky. I can't go that much into detail in this kind of a talk. But you have, first of all, extend the ITE, because the ITE, as you've seen in the picture, for example, provides some information in the AUT configuration dialog, how this monitoring agent is actually configured from a user perspective. And then, in the second part, you have to extend the AUT agent, because this is the one, or this is the component which is actually starting your AUT and remote controlling it. Okay, so you have to basically provide two extensions or two implementations for two different components to realize a custom monitoring agent. And it's always, and it's also the same, for example, for supporting custom components. Sometimes there are good reasons to implement your own UI widgets. Yeah, a very good example is the Nebula project, which holds a bunch of many custom UI controls for specific needs. And as long as they are implemented either due to composition of existing components or deriving from existing components, Jubula also already supports them out of the box. But if you, for example, render your component on a canvas on your own, we can actually remote control that. So we've got also an extension mechanism for that. And you can do like 3 different kinds of extensions with this mechanism. You can either extend actions for already existing components. You can extend a toolkit with new components. That's what most people do. And last but not least, you can also write a whole new custom toolkit support, for example, to support other UI toolkits, which are not currently supported. And it's basically the same. You have to provide the ITE with some information for test specification. And basically, you tell the ITE via an extension point which caps are supported, or which caps are supported, and how it's about the type system of that component. What kind of component do you add? On what kind of semantic is it supposed to be supported? And a cap is component action parameter. You say which component provides which actions, with which kind of data or parameters. So that you tell the ITE. And on the other hand, you provide fragments or, for example, bundles. It depends a little bit about on the toolkit you're extending. But you provide an implementation for the AUT agent, which allows it to remote control, to actually remote control that widget. And this extension holds the actual technical implementation. So there are some classes involved which remote control it. I gave a talk on the EclipseCon last year about that, a talk on its own, how to do that. So take a look at that if you're interested. We got many more information how to extend Jubula. We got an extension API manual. There's our basic page. We got the forum, the developer mailing list. So if you're interested in doing some of the extensions or got other ideas, simply contact us. And maybe afterwards, think about contributing, because we are happy to have some contributions, and we will definitely take a look at them and review them and likely apply them so that they are maintained by us from that day on. Thank you very much. I think I'm pretty good in time. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I have several things to cover. Then we can stay a little longer. But I think there's some stuff like, for example, Mylyn support for executing tests in a continuous integration. Is that on your roadmap?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Would you be willing to
Yeah,
that subject?
yeah, definitely.
Great.
Very interesting. Any other questions?